Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer. Today I'm joined by Hans Lander of the Myth of the 20th Century podcast. Hans, how are you?
I'm great, and I'm glad to be back. Very highly respected. Feeling highly respected.
I know, this is the most highly respected podcast. And also, I'm now highly credentialed. A lot of people don't believe that, but we'll get that into that in a moment. So first up, we're going to talk about today is I made the AWFLs very angry last week. Here's the backstory. Republican Congressman Ted Yoho of Florida angrily confronted Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez last week over her dumb comments about crime. AOC claimed crime is rising because people need to put food on the table. AOC called Yoho rude during the exchange, and Yoho allegedly said, "fucking bitch," as he walked away. I'm sorry to our older listeners who don't want to hear vulgarities. I had to mention it. Sorry. So you might want to bleep that out. Anyway, this was treated as a great crime by the press and AOC. Even though Yoho apologized for the encounter, AOC refused the apology and delivered a histrionic speech on the House floor. During the speech, she said she wished her father was around, implying he would beat up Yoho for the way he talked to a woman. She also acted like a man must always talk to a woman like she's a proper 19th century lady. I quote tweeted the speech saying, "Liberal women demand to be treated as equals, yet cling to Victorian standards when men talk to them as equals." This tweet greatly upset blue check AWFLs and their simps, drawing in hundreds of replies from such big names as feminist writer Roxane Gay, disgraced Congresswoman Katie Hill, the director of the Spider-Man animated movie, and washed-up comedian David Alan Greer. No relation to me, as he wanted to make clear. David Alan Greer, of course, is black. And it's spelled G-R-I-E-R, not E-E-R. Why were all these people mad at my free speech, Hans?
First of all, was AOC's dad even around when she was growing up?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, yeah.
She's always like, I was raised by a single mom. I'm working class. And yeah, no, that's all a part of her backstory. I don't think her dad was around much.
Yeah, so the idea that you can't be mean to other congressmen. I mean, this is politics. People say and do horrible stuff to each other all the time. If a slight insult is going to be too much to handle, then maybe you shouldn't be in American politics. But obviously, she's accentuating and being hyperbolic about the whole thing just for political grandstanding and trying to frame Republicans as insensitive or whatever.
And misogynist and sexist. And this is how they talk to women. They demean women. They don't treat us as equals by calling me a fucking bitch. As all these people were saying in my replies to like, "Oh, excuse me, do you call your coworkers a fucking bitch? Like, that's not equal. Like, do you insult men?" And there's all these people who were like, "If you said that to me as a man, you would be going home in a hospital." I was like, and it's like some like fat neckbeard dude who's never experienced violence before. And all these people were saying this stuff. And all the women were encouraging that. It's like, if a man said this, if you said this to a man, you'd beat them up. And I was like, why are you, upholding these antiquated gender norms? Like, why are you, these are archaic. A woman could easily beat up a man. I mean, every Hollywood movie shows me that. Why do you guys expect a man to do this fighting for you? And really, it's really odd that the women, like when they're in the workplace, they just want to demand these standards. It's like, no, if you're in a workplace and people are cussing each other out, it's probably not a good sign, but people do get angry and argue with each other. Actually, one of the funniest stories I have is from when I was at the Daily Caller. I got into a violent argument with she now works at CNN. You probably know her, Caitlin Collins. And we oddly enough argued over her when Katie McHugh got fired. If y'all know Katie McHugh's backstory, she was a former Breitbart editor who went down the drain and decided to dox all of her former friends, people such as me. Anyway, that's not the point of the story. Anyway, she got fired. She had like some GoFundMe, or I think it was through Researcher, about like, help, I need medical funds. And Caitlin, to her credit, she was right about this. Caitlin began making fun of it. It's like, oh my God, why are you doing this? Like, this is funny. She's demanding a handout. And we got an argument over whether it's proper for somebody who's just fired to have a GoFundMe, and we were like cussing each other out. I wasn't using any insulting terms, but the whole office just kind of stood there dumbly. It's like there was like 4-letter words exchanged over this stupid thing. So there, and I witnessed that in several times, other in my workplaces and various workplaces I worked at. People would start yelling at each other, insulting each other, maybe not necessarily in the middle of the office, but people would exchange words if they had a problem with each other. And this is Congress. Like, there is a long history of lawmakers, even resorting to violence. I mean, if you look
and like in the Civil War area, they all were threatening to shoot each other. They were getting in fist fights
and duels. Yeah. And it's like duels and canings. Like, if you read any of the early history of America, especially around the Revolution, like right after, the first Congress and after the Constitution is signed, like, these lawmakers were fighting each other all the time. They're like, you called me an idiot. And then they would like cane each other or challenge each other to duels. Of course, we have, our third vice president killing our first Treasury secretary in a duel in 1804. Of course, that's Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. And this violence continued on. Really, the only kind of demands for civility that pretty much all these Washington shitheads like demand to be upheld is really something that was created after the Cold War. Both parties had their conservatives and liberals. Their main focus was the Cold War and making sure our military budget is up to date and we're standing strong against communism. There was a, shared interest and shared enemy, and most of these people shared the similar culture. I mean, most of the lawmakers were still white and Christian, and we're not like AOC.
I think that, most of the lawmakers were white and Christian, and post-war America was very performative for the rest of the world, right? We were trying to show the rest of the world how politics and statecraft ought to be done, because in our minds, so much of the world had destroyed itself with bad politics and aggressiveness that it was time to show, gentlemanly conduct and civility and, sort of bipartisan consensus making. I think that became part of the ethos, maybe with good intentions, as a way of showing that peace was possible. But now, as the American empire, the American image is so tainted internationally for a variety of reasons. Less and less, people probably feel the need to keep up with this performativeness for an international audience and an internal audience that cares less and less and have themselves become more vulgar, more aggressive. Politics around the world is getting extreme. There's multiple countries right now in a state of war with each other or near war with each other. Yeah. I mean, if you really want to see, uncivil politics, go on Indian Twitter and look at their comments about China.
Well, they still have lynch mobs there who will they'll accuse Muslims of eating cow, and then there'll be these like Hindutva and these Hindu nationalists, they put down like calling me a stinky white man to go out and like there's a Muslim eating a cow, and they go with their sticks and like beat him in public, and they have when Trump visited there was like a dozen Muslims that were killed in like mob violence. And this is a very common thing. India is like, it's totally crazy the amount of violence they have. I mean, these countries have always had like violence, and now we're trying to impose democracy on them, and it might not be the best thing. It's all these people with different interests, and they don't have this Anglo culture that like, it's like, okay, you can't like, stab each other in the middle of the hall.
That Anglo culture was hundreds of years of real political violence in England. I mean,
yes.
If you consider the English Civil Wars, the time of Cromwell, the War of the Roses, all these long stretches of time in English politics, you'll see why the notion of the gentlemanly statecrafter kind of came about, and it came about as out of necessity and a realization that a lot of lives had been lost over sort of violent and maybe slightly needless politicking.
Yeah.
And I feel like AOC represents a generation of people who've never experienced anything close to that. So for someone to then like passively say, walking away, well, you're a fucking bitch, that is so extreme. I mean, you can just imagine during the English Civil War with Cromwell, you had members of parliament leading armies against each other and beheading each other on the battlefield. I mean,
yeah, they definitely did not like each other, and we had that in the Civil War. I think this culture of civility in our country really happened after reconciliation, after redemption rather, after Reconstruction, where they're like, okay, Reconstruction's not working, handing over the South to illiterate slaves and these corrupt scallywags and carpetbaggers was not a good idea. We're going to see what's similar to us. And we had this like very hostile, very violent political culture before, and we're going to try to overcome that by emphasizing our shared commonalities. We're white Christian, we're white Christian Protestant, we primarily hail from an Anglo culture. We're going to celebrate these what unites us and try to overcome our differences. And that's also why they were okay with putting up statues to Lee and all these other Confederates, is it was about like, the war is over, we're going to celebrate their heroism and their fight, not necessarily celebrate their cause. These are your heroes. They're a part of the American pantheon, and we're just all going to move on so we can have a more civil culture. And now, you have most of these politicians who, their ancestors were, of course, not here in the Civil War, or even here in World War II. And so they don't have their connection to America. It's just a place for them to make money and to exploit it for gain. And they think that like we're founded by white supremacy, and that like there must be no ground conceded to white supremacists. They must be exercised from the public sphere. And they think that all Republicans are white supremacists. And we're seeing this lack of civility yesterday with the Bill Barr hearing. I'm sure some of our listeners watched some of the clips of it, and it was like ridiculous. It was all these non-white congressmen, but many of them were women, which is funny because apparently only men would talk in a demeaning way to women. But all these women were just like insulting Barr. They're like, excuse me, you just show no respect for me, as he's like trying to answer a question. He's like, let me answer. He's like, reclaiming my time. That's very rude for you to try to speak. And it's like, you just asked me a question. It's like, I did not ask you a question. And I would have lost my mind. I would just like, I'm leaving. I cannot handle this. Bill Barr is definitely somebody made of sterner stuff. And all of them were asking him stupid questions about like, why are you killing people by not supporting Obamacare? He's like, I'm the Attorney General. I don't handle.
How do you even answer
policy.
that? I mean,
also, by the way, I had 2 kids who had cancer, so I do care about healthcare issues. They're like, stop playing politics and support Obamacare. And they just kept, and they were also demanding that he use like napalm against anti-lockdown protesters. So like, it's wrong to use tear gas and batons against Antifa who are firebombing a courthouse, but you should use this against the peaceful anti-lockdown protesters. That the whole hearing was a sham, and it really shows that there is no culture of civility. Like, these are two opposite sides. Like, there's no culture of civility, and really only centrist Democrats. Like, I think Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi would like a civil culture on the Hill, because I mean, they've always just got along. They're from a different generation, and anytime they try to be really partisan, it comes off as really fake and contrived, and they really just want to get along with Republicans to pass legislation. Republicans are obsessed with civility. When the baseball field shooting happened in 2017, Republicans could have had like a major political gain there. They're like, a left-wing extremist tried to kill us. This is the fault of the media and Democrats. Instead, they're like, this is all because of the lack of civility on Capitol Hill. And I remember there was like one congressman who went on TV who had a bullet who was shot through his gym bag out there, and he held up the bullet and he's like, "This is a reminder of why we need to be civil to each other at Capitol Hill." I was like, what? No, that is not. You're an idiot. Like, you're so stupid. Like, there is no chances for civility in the culture, and they still blame Trump and Republicans for, some left-wing extremists trying to kill them.
Well, I think this is
the culture we have now.
Yeah, I want to say that Republicans must feel like there's some huge chunk, an untapped political chunk of the population that really prioritizes civility in politics as their number one or number two or three issue on a day-to-day basis, and that they're trying to appeal to this huge swath of the American population by saying we need to be civil, we need to have free speech, and it just, no one cares. I mean, people do care that they're not allowed to say certain things anymore. I don't think people really like political violence, but when something bad happens to you, people, I think, actually expect on an emotional level that you're going to get mad about it and that you're probably going to try and seek restitution. Like, I think it was maybe very shocking that absolutely nothing came out of what is Steve Scalise, like the House Majority Whip, getting shot.
Well, now whip, minority whip, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that guy got shot. And absolutely nothing came out of it. No congressional investigation, no major investigation into who this guy was talking to, no major investigation into Antifa violence in general, which there was plenty of documented at the time. Instead, they did what was probably the most counterintuitive thing to general human emotion. And I don't think that really appeals to anyone. I don't think anyone is going around saying, God, I wish Republicans would be more civil. It just doesn't seem like a hard issue that they are actually tapping into. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never really seen the logic behind their political stance on this sort of thing. And they don't ever get emotional. They don't ever get passionate about even their own lives.
Yeah, and I think that in that same year, Rand Paul was attacked by his neighbor. It was like a left winger, and they tried to deny it was over politics. There was even like news reports planted that said that was like over a fence, and it was like no, it was like clearly political violence. And Rand Paul tried to turn it into a political issue, and the media then demonized him for trying to do that. They're like, you're trying to exploit you having a broken rib because your neighbor attacked you, and while mocking him at the same time for having his rib broken. And it's, there's, I mean, this is the most cliche thing. Yes, there's obviously a double standard. Even at that time, there in summer 2017, there was like, especially in the healthcare fight, there was like a Republican who's ran off the road by an angry constituent over the healthcare issue. There was like at these town halls, these constituents would like almost threaten and to beat them up. And even when in 2010, when there was like these raucous town halls driven by the Tea Party, like the media was like, this is the new Klan. And then they're like, oh, this is just people speaking power to these lawmakers, these corrupt lawmakers. Like they shouldn't, and they should accept that some guy may run them off the road and try to kill them. They should just stop trying to repeal Obamacare. And this is.
Do you recall? And I could be wrong on this. A few years ago, wasn't there a train full of congressmen, that Republican congressmen, headed back to Washington? Yeah, and a truck sort of magically appeared on the tracks and nearly derailed the whole train.
Yeah, I remember that. I think that was an accident, but
okay. I mean, I was thinking.
I think if it was intentional, they would have had to take that more serious. I mean, well, they did take the baseball one, but they always resort to well, first off, they want to be respected by the media, and they got a lot of praise from the media for standing above it all and not politicizing it, even though the media itself was politicizing it to blame Republicans for getting themselves shot at. And then the very next week, when they were like, we're restoring civility, Democrats went straight back to saying they're trying to kill millions of Americans by repealing Obamacare. So it doesn't really work out. I mean, some of it is that they have no influence over the media, and a lot of these congressmen desperately want to be liked by Democratic colleagues and the media itself. I mean, if there was a very telling stand from, I think it was Congressman Cedric Richmond, who's this really dumb black congressman for Louisiana, who is like saying that like Republican congressmen are not my friends. I don't like you. You're racist. And then like these Republicans are like, why would you say that? I'm your friend. I care about you. And he's like, I don't care. you racist. And he's like saying this in a hearing about how he has no respect for his Republican congressman. It's like, I respect you. Oh, that's so mean. Why would you say that? And it's like so weak. And, you know, they just, as like the DC culture around Republicans and conservatives, like they don't want to win. They just want to kind of go along to get along. And they really don't know how to handle this new situation.
It
and even Democrats.
it feels like a perverted paternalism almost. Like Republicans feel as though they're sort of the elders in the room, right? And they have to try and be calm and patient with their possible future African American colleagues or whatever, and their Democrat colleagues. I always get this sense from Republicans that they really want to both be passionate and patient with Democrats, but at the same time want Democrats to learn or convert to Republicanism because they see the virtue of civility and free markets. And you know, it feels like a doddering old grandpa waiting for his, like, you know, shithead teenage grandson who's burning down the local school to actually figure out that being nice to people is actually good. And when, you know, you're appealing to a large number of people who actually think that burning down the local school and shooting heroin in your veins is cool, I don't think that you're going to stop anytime soon, especially if they're giving you money to do it.
Yeah.
And Republicans don't seem to grasp that yet, that this is not just an ideological battle. This is really a battle that involves huge swaths of the American population probably being impossible to convert to republicanism and maybe being seen as, or should be seen as, political enemies, I would say.
Yeah, and we're seeing some of this going on with the reaction to the riots all over the country, is that Republicans are befuddled that Democrats are either denying that they're happening, supporting it, or claiming that it's actually secretly white supremacists or right-wing extremists firebombing the federal courthouse. And it's seeing this in the Portland thing, is that, you know, in the hearing yesterday, Bill Barr tried to show is like, hey, this is what's happening in Portland, are actually all over the country, but specifically in Portland. And they're like, Trump and the federal police are causing this. There's also right-wing saboteurs in there as well. And they're like, what? This is real violence. But
how come none of these right-wing saboteurs have been caught and exposed yet? I mean, that's kind of
no. And they're trying to run with this meme, like both in Richmond, police are claiming that right-wing extremists are responsible for all the violence, when there are several clips of left-wing black bloc people, you know, damaging and like tearing down statues and dragging them to a river. And I was like, I don't think the white supremacists are tearing down Jefferson Davis and throwing him in a river just to make the left look bad.
You know who got arrested in Richmond? Socialist dog mom, whatever her name is.
Yeah, a bunch of left-wing
left-wing
accounts
is that,
like that. Yeah.
Is that a is that crypto?
Well, she was arrested for peacefully protesting. That was like peaceful protest, but the real violence was caused by white nationalists. And they're even trying to still do this in Minneapolis, when the umbrella man, who is he could have maybe been a cop. He looked like a standard Antifa type, even how he talked and moved. He was like a tall, lanky guy. And the way he talked, he sounded like, you know, your average Antifa guy in Minneapolis. He did not sound like a Hell's Angel, which they're now claiming that this guy was a Hell's Angel who was involved in white supremacist violence. And I look at him, I was like, I don't think you'd be carrying like around an umbrella and walking away. The way he walked is like stereotypical, like middle-class white guy with left-wing views. It's not like a big burly guy. It was like wearing a biker like jacket. And I've
literally never heard of that, of like Hell's Angels doing sabotage work dressed as other people.
Yeah, and why would he be setting fire to an auto zone to make the leftists look? Why would a Hell's Angel be doing that? Like, there's not, like, first off, they're a criminal gang. Like, they're not looking to cause like more attention to themselves. They're looking to make a profit over illicit activity. Like, this is not profiting them at all. why would the Hells Angel try to paint Antifa bad? And also, there was so much obvious left-wing violence in Minneapolis. Is like, why would you go out of your way to claim that this one guy? And the evidence is so thin. It's somebody saying a friend told them, and this friend is wishing to remain anonymous and not name this guy, told them that they're a Hells Angel and involved in some white supremacist prison gang as well. And all the police and media are running with this is like, the Umbrella Man was a Hells Angel. No, we don't know who he is. No, we don't have his name. But a friend of someone said that he was a Hells Angels. And this is just running with it because it's clearly a politically motivated goal to blame the violence on right-wing extremists. They cannot blame the left for this. And it's the same with going on with Portland. They have to say that these were totally peaceful. And then federal police showed up in their secret unmarked vans. And then the people had to fight back because they didn't want to be kidnapped and executed in a black site. And I know this is breaking news right now, is that, the federal law enforcement is apparently leaving from Portland, even though DHS head Chad Wolf is saying that they're staying until the violence subsides. It's unclear what's really happening, even though the governor said she talked to Mike Pence and that they are leaving. Now, Hans, you're a little bit different. You think that this is actually a good thing that the federal law enforcement is leaving Portland. Why do you think that?
Well, I don't know if I think it's a good thing, but I was trying to at least give a counterfactual idea as to, what it could actually mean. I mean, first of all, I don't really know if Portland is the city where you want to drop the hammer. I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, when the Mexican federal police went into a city and accidentally, in the midst of a drug raid, captured one of El Chapo's sons. Within 3 to 4 hours, they were in a very hostile city to their interests. And they were absolutely swarmed with thousands of Sinaloa cartels. You had multiple members of the Juarez cartel. They were basically overwhelmed, and they had to give up and leave after they had suffered multiple casualties. And I can sort of see not maybe something that violent taking place in Portland, but a similar dynamic where if you were to actually continue to be aggressive with locals, and if you were able to try and stake a claim or even take territory around the courthouse in advance, you could wind up in a situation where you're absolutely overwhelmed by the local population who become very incensed. And even with all of the anti-riot gear and all of the non-lethal gear, I don't know if the feds have enough of a presence to actually defend their position properly in the midst of total chaos. So I think that I know that they've been vanning quite a few people. They've probably captured quite a few members of this clique that is at least trying to lead or act as shock troopers for a wider effort. They've probably gathered an immense amount of intelligence, and they've gotten some combat experience. So it might be best to just cut your losses and leave. Now, it seems like the Oregon governor is bullshitting and is trying to get a deal or trying to make a deal or pressure the administration into giving her what she wants, because this is intensely embarrassing. Oregon's kind of a declining state. Doesn't really have a real industrial economy anymore, and its economy is really dependent on Eugene, Portland, and a few other cities. If Eugene and Portland in particular are completely engulfed in permanent riot mode for the rest of the year, along with the economic collapse from COVID and multiple major universities in Oregon being closed, I don't really think that she's going to be in a good spot politically. And she could be looking at a much wider social problem in the state. So maybe it is best that the feds pull out now and allow these cities in Oregon, which I would say are extremely hostile territory to Trump and to the right wing in general, to collapse in on themselves, which they will do. Eugene, if you've ever been there, is not a city with a strong local economy. It basically exists as an extension of University of Oregon. And if, the city were to be in riot mode and COVID mode for the rest of the year, I don't really think it would it would it would have an economy anymore come next year. And maybe that's ultimately best, is to allow these centers of power for the left in Oregon and on the West Coast to collapse. I get the idea that, or the take that this is embarrassing for the federal government and it's embarrassing for Trump, who looks like he's sort of ceding ground to rioters. But, I think that you could argue that the mission has been somewhat successful thus far, and Oregon is probably not the place where you want to make your stand. I feel like they should make their stand. They should have done it already in Minneapolis, and they should have done it already in DC. And maybe they're waiting.
Well, they did it in DC. It never got as violent here.
Yeah, that's true.
In DC,
that's true.
And in Minneapolis, they don't really have. They need like a battleground. I mean, they have the federal courthouse, which served as the battle. And Trump did. I think this is exciting his base. I think his base was, depressed over how he was not doing anything about the riots, but showing that, like, I have these troops out there, but the Democratic governors are handcuffing them, and look at how violent they are. And this will happen under Joe Biden. They won't even send anybody out there under Joe Biden. They'll let them bomb our courthouses. This does send a strong message. And also, the more violence that happens, it's ultimately good, and it's happening in a city that Republicans don't care about.
Right.
Of course, he doesn't need. I mean, he's not going to win Oregon. They had theories that they may win Oregon.
I mean, like Oregon. Oregon politically is interesting. Oregon is very weird. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's like a good chunk of Oregon is basically Duck Dynasty tier. They're great people, but they've definitely imbued the redneck mentality quite a bit into themselves. And there's definitely an element, even into the rural areas, which is weird, of the sort of the hippie white people cult that is pervasive, very pervasive in Oregon and Oregon politics. And that extends into the cities. And the cities, Eugene in particular, but Portland as well, are full of weird immigrants from very weird parts of the world that you probably don't really want to interact with, and a lot of very insane and very politically active white people. And these are not like ethnic whites predominantly. Like, I would say that if you actually looked at their racial background, these are mostly Anglos who settled Oregon, which is interesting. And they are probably one of the most politically active cities that I can think of, in west of the Rocky Mountains. And Portland, in particular, has also become kind of a drug haven, a symbol of the collapse in the Oregon way of life and the Oregon economy. So, I can understand the theory that Trump could maybe win Oregon, because he didn't come too far from doing that in 2016. And if you look at a county by county breakdown, most of Oregon is a very red state. Now, the population out in those regions of Oregon is extremely low. Oregon has seen a lot of depopulation due to the collapse of steel, the collapse of lumber, the collapse of farming, the collapse of the traditional Oregon industries, the ironworks, so on. But there is a possibility, sure, that if the violence continues to get out of control and normal Oregonians, even though there's fewer and fewer of them, even maybe in Portland and Eugene and Bend and these places, decide that this has gone too far and they want someone to come in and stop it. And if they see no response from Kate Brown, I believe is the governor of Oregon, then sure, they could be motivated to stay home in November, or maybe vote for Trump, or definitely not vote for Biden. So ultimately, not all of Oregon is bad. There's quite a few weird people that live there. And that's why I think it might not be the best state to stake your claim for, the battle with Antifa. I would say that wait for an actual battleground state, or wait for a state that that matters a bit more. Oregon is definitely not a important state anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that point. I just think that it just shows a degree of weakness that Trump does not want to show. It shows that he'll back down to Antifa, and it does, depress the base. The base wants him to keep people there, and he has to say, like, I'm a strong fighter who will not back down to anyone. And him just backing down. And these protesters know the optics. They'll have like a huge celebration. They'll be like, "You suck, Trump. Like, we beat you, Trump." And like the media will celebrate this as a great defeat of Trump, and that'll get under Trump's skin. So he has to keep people there. I don't think it's not the state to have the battle yet, but I think they're trying to have the battle in Chicago, but there's not really right. They're just going after street criminals in Chicago. I mean,
Chicago PD just seems like they're totally uninterested in allowing that to happen. They were beating the shit out of people at some protest.
But they're getting handcuffed now. I mean, they've been neutered over several years. I mean, with the Laquan McDonald, I think that was his name. They had all these reforms under Rahm Emanuel, and Lori Lightfoot got carried into her office on the basis that she would crack down on police abuses and police brutality. And Kim Foxx, who's famous for dropping charges against Jussie Smollett, is also going after police as well. The police is a little bit different. I mean, the police in Chicago, police definitely are different from Portland, and they want to go after these guys, but they haven't had the degree of rioting. I mean, they did have the infamous one where they're guarding the Columbus statue, and then the protesters were pelting them with rocks and water bottles as they stood helplessly around trying to guard the statue. But Lori Lightfoot just decided to take down the statue, and I guess problem solved. Minneapolis, Trump just wants that city to turn into a total hellhole, and that may make him win Minnesota rather. Minnesota, the polling shows Trump only down by 3 points there.
Which probably means he's ahead.
Like, a lot of people, I've said this several times on the podcast, like, they're like, oh, he's down 8 points. And then a lot of these battleground states he can win. There's a lot of states that are sleeper. Like, I think he could win Nevada. I mean, his numbers are improving among Hispanics. Democrats are not really investing in Nevada that much. It's still a state that could veer his way depending on turnout. And I think Minnesota, if they see just like how horrible Minneapolis is getting under policies that are being championed by Democrats, it could be a big win for Trump. I don't know if he necessarily wants it to turn into a battleground, because they could effectively say Trump is making this problem worse. And I think even in Portland, that's somewhat true, but they were burning stuff down long before federal troops. I mean, they kept burning down like the Pioneer statue and other things in Portland. Every single night they would like clean it up and like repair it. Then the next night they'd burn it down again. Right. And they were targeting the federal courthouse, and they're like, we have to send people there.
Well, the window for a battle for Minneapolis, I think, is closing just due to the weather. Minneapolis is very different weather from Portland, and come October, it's not fun to be outside sometimes in Minneapolis. It's extremely wet. It can be very windy. It can start snowing. It can even get blizzards. Whereas Portland is just wet year round, and it can get uncomfortably cold, but not deadly cold. And I honestly feel like if there is going to be a battle, even though it's probably not ideal, it will be in a place on the West Coast, or it'll be in a place maybe in the South in the next coming months. If there is going to be something in Minneapolis, it'll probably happen by the end of September. If it doesn't happen then, I doubt it's going to happen, just due to weather constraints. You never want to fight a revolution start it in the winter. You always want to start it in the spring, which is kind of why Occupy Wall Street failed, because they got most of their momentum going like right before the dead of winter in New York City, which was sort of terrible strategic move. That's why they all got cornered in Zuccotti Park and taken out, because they were trying to survive and huddling together in negative 10-degree weather or whatever it was.
And work out very well.
Yeah.
We'll have to see what happens. I think we're going to see a lot more happenings like we're seeing in Portland.
Oh yeah,
as the election approaches.
There's no way this is going to stop with Portland. I mean, it is like a weird microcosm of insane offals and the modern white left, but that dynamic exists plenty of other places, and Minneapolis is actually a place where that also kind of exists. I would say at this point, Chicago's not out of the question, and certainly places even like Indianapolis.
Yeah, I think Atlanta's another. Atlanta, there's just, you never know. I mean, there could just be. I mean, all it takes is one police-involved shooting, and then all hell breaks loose. So we'll have to see. It's definitely I imagine future highly respected episodes we'll be talking about similar topics. But moving along, and speaking of whites, the Washington Post is now based in Red Pill. The paper announced today it would be capitalizing white to show that white is a distinct cultural identity in the United States, and whites are a, quote, collective group that has had its own cultural and historical impact on the nation, unquote. Conservatives and leftists lost their minds over this, saying it's both dangerous and ahistorical. Do you think it's dangerous and ahistorical, Hans?
Who is the woman that wrote White Fragility?
Robin DiAngelo.
Robin DiAngelo.
Yeah,
I was gonna say Robin Hansen, but I was like, no, that's the
autistic it's an guy. Italian. The Dagos are after us.
No, Robin Hansen was the autistic libertarian writer who got in trouble for making like a fried chicken joke. So Robin, I think that Robin DiAngelo has been criticized for this point by the left, which is interesting in that they criticize her for actually accidentally creating a coherent white identity in White Fragility. And so the critique from the left is actually that Robin DiAngelo is a crypto white nationalist. I'm not making this up. This is what these people believe. And that in her attempt to write about white fragility, she is actually laying the groundwork for a post hoc rationalization of white identity in America, that whites are a coherent group, that they have coherent group interests, that they work as a team and all this sort of stuff. So I feel like the wide-ranging acceptance of DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, is an extremely popular book. It's definitely been read by all the writers at the Washington Post. I will say that my former employer actually, which has nothing to do with news or politics, ostensibly it was a tech company, had actually recommended to the entire company that we all read White Fragility as one of many books to learn more about racism and political action. So this is a book that is become widely accepted, and I think that the notion that Washington Post is coming out and saying, well, white is a coherent identity, white is a historical people group, is definitely stemming from that DiAngelo-esque school of thought, which is probably bad ultimately, because it's giving political cover to the forces on the left in places like the Washington Post to treat whites collectively for social problems. I can't see anything good coming out of this. What I see coming out of it is laying the groundwork through that DiAngelo school of thought that whites are, a declining coherent identity. They're a demographically displaced coherent identity. They're an increasingly sort of mixed coherent identity, and that these are all good things we should write about. And it's easier for us to write about if we view whites collectively as a group, because we can more easily target them. And if we make whites in this country, the white readers of the Washington Post, who are not necessarily people that I think you and I would want to have a conversation with, but these people.
Oh, I am. I'm all about civility and open discourse. I try to find people who disagree with me so I can have an honest conversation where we walk away. It's like, you know what? I'll agree to disagree with you.
Yeah. Thank you, PragerU Representative Scott Greer. But, so I can see these people, these white readers of the Washington Post, these white new intelligentsia, as I think of them, also seeing themselves as part of the coherent white identity, and that this should be, I think, ultimately cause for concern, because the my fellow white people shtick could be taken to a whole new level. Whereas before, I think it felt always very hollow, even for a lot of whites who are more in the center or not even really political, to be talked to that way. Now, if they're all told, hey, we're all part of this group, this horrible, oppressive, coherent identity, and it's now passively acceptable to think so in even elite liberal circles, that can be utilized for low-level and high-level macro, micro sort of political activity that I don't think is going to be conducive for white interests at all. In fact, it might even be used aggressively to create this myth, I propose, that whites are actually have some kind of duty in America to be the first through the wall, or, take the first bullet and just kind of hold on to the wheel of progress and always march forward and make the sacrifice for others. That's what whites do. And I can easily see that becoming the philosophy of white identity, as according to the Washington Post or the New York Times, or the kind of people that read Robin DiAngelo.
Yeah, and it's to atone for their past sins.
Right.
That in order to make whites as second-class citizens, which is the ultimate goal, they have to make whites think that they're a part of collective, or they have to imagine whites are a collective. And this is very different from what the politically correct racial discourse of was like even 5 or 10 years ago. It's like, we're all just individuals. Like color doesn't mean anything. Race is a social construct. But well, I mean, they still say race is a social construct, but it's a very important social construct that we need to keep around so we can build this new Herrenvolk democracy that we have, which we now have. It is like the blacks are at the top of all these left-wing thinkers have argued America is a Herrenvolk democracy, which Herrenvolk means master race in German. And this is a very popular academic theory. And they've always said that whites are at the top. Well, now they want us to put us to the bottom, and all the non-whites are at the top, and blacks at the peak of it. And in order to make that happen, they have to say that whites are a real, a real thing, or a real group. They can't just say we're all individuals. Color doesn't matter, race doesn't matter, but it's like very about your color and racial identity is like insanely important. And conservatives are very upset. I think a lot of the left, some of the left is upset with this too. I saw that, you're making the point that left does not like that. This ultimately comes to Robin DiAngelo's way of thinking. I think that is correct. Karen Attiah, who is Washington Post, very woke, Global Post opinion editor. She's a wealthy African immigrant, or the child of wealthy African immigrants. And she posts like things about how white women deserve violence, and they better be grateful that all we're asking for is equality and not revenge on white women. As Karen Attiah herself thirsts for white men on the TL. Many such cases. This always happens with woke.
Oh my God, man! I feel like
as I've tweeted before, woke women of color are anti-colonizers on the streets and colonized in the sheets. It's many such cases happens with AOC, Ilhan Omar. We see this every single time.
Wasn't there that batshit North Korean?
Oh yeah,
woman
she was like, she was like passed around by white frat guys, and now she's like this insane North Korean stan. But digressing, that's a digression. But moving on to the point is that this is something that's a left-wing point, and a lot of conservatives were trying to say, oh, this is what white nationalists want. This is ahistorical. You're helping out white supremacists. There's never been such a thing as white identity, and they want to even say that it's ahistorical or whatnot, which regardless of what the Washington Post's point is, I mean, the Washington Post is not trying to support the dissident rights viewpoint of race relations.
Yeah,
they're trying to say that
not.
they're trying to build a racial hierarchy that puts whites at the bottom, and this goes along with that. But at the same time, it does have the unintended effect of encouraging whites to have possibly a positive identity of whiteness. And white identity in America has existed, not necessarily in the way that Robin DiAngelo wants, or even some of the cringier white nationalists have imagined, is that ever since the founding, they did see there was maybe they didn't necessarily call it a white identity, but that's what it became called later on, is that, people come here in the body politic, white Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. Not everybody, of course, may have been Anglo-Saxon, but they were largely Protestant. And then even over changes, they did have aversion to Catholics joining the body politic. They're foreign. Eventually, Catholics merge into this Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture where people eventually, well, you're white and you share the same cultural norms than us. You may have a different denomination, but whatever, we'll accept that. And this is just built on. And it was just really only after in the Cold War era where we began like, oh no, we're just all individuals. Like, white identity, what's that? We've never seen race in America. What is this? No, our founders just saw you as individuals, that all men are created equal. And this is all that we're about. And they tried to purge itself of this exclusive Anglo identity where you did have to typically be somebody who's from a European immigrant background to merge into this common white identity. And then many conservatives were trying to argue that, oh no, we don't have white identity. It's your real identity is French or Spanish or Dutch. I mean, there's so many Dutch Americans, who, flying Dutch pride worldwide in America. They're real as a real sense of Dutch identity in America. I mean, well, of course, in some areas where the Pennsylvania Dutch, who are Germans, who are really just Germans, who are like the Amish and Mennonites. But like the average suburban person who has like some Dutch ancestry, no, it's like you're imagining that the Roosevelts' primary identity was that they are Dutch ancestry, and when they really just focused in on their on their ties to Anglo-Saxon culture and ancestry. So it is like stupid. These ethnic enclaves don't exist. The whites have merged into a kind of generic white
There's
American.
been an ethno-genesis.
Yes, there's an ethno-genesis where Poles, Italians, Irish, Germans, Anglos, Scotch all kind of merge into a white American identity. It's not well articulated because the average, actually, white American identity is pretending you're not a race at all. You're just an individual who is defined by like what sports team you like, or maybe what political party you vote for. They're like, oh, it's just the color of my skin. I'm colorblind. I don't see race. That is, I think even the left would agree that that's like a part of white-eyed American identity. But Washington Post and the leftists are just, they may not realize, or this may not even be the result of it, is that they are trying to put all these people into a group. It's not necessarily historical. It has always existed where groups would come in, they didn't speak our language, they had very different cultural norms, and then they eventually got Anglified and they merged into the broader white American community. Whether they saw that or not, or they just saw that they were American or just an individual, that doesn't really matter so much. Is that this has always existed since the colonial days, where people from various parts of Europe came, and they may have tried to retain their cultural ties to that country that was not a part of the UK for longer than usual, but eventually they just merged into the general Anglo-Saxon norm. And that was the purpose of the 1924 Immigration Act, is we're taking all these Eastern and Southern European immigrants here, and then we're like, no more until you all assimilate. And they did assimilate. Unfortunately, they assimilated at the time of the Cold War, where we built a civic nationalism which denied that race had any involvement, that we're just all colorblind, and race has never mattered in this country before. So you have the point that this is a negative factor, that this is just going to make whites feel bad and demand that they do more for pay reparations and sacrifice their job opportunities for these oppressed non-whites who are usually high caste Indians who have oppressed people for thousands of years, but now they come here and pretend that they're just as oppressed as the descendants of slaves.
But there's also always like a weird Chinese element to it. Like a lot of these people, a lot of these journalists, I think like the editor of the journalist who was going to dox Starslate Codex was this Chinese chick, the New York Times. And it's always hilarious to me to see Indians, like you say, these high caste Indians and Chinese emigres who probably have like a cousin in the Communist Party, who talk about social justice issues and racial issues, and they put their pronouns in their bio, and they want to be very prestigious and they want to play by the rules and all that. It's always just. It feels so hollow and it feels so cynical and bizarre.
Well, it's a strategy for obtaining power. I mean, they're very high IQ, and Indians, not so much like East Asians, but Indians are incredibly clannish and they'll start networking, and they realize that complaining about systemic racism and white privilege ensures that they can rise to higher positions, and diversity. It's like, we need diversity. Hey, I'm diverse. I'm non-white. Hire me. And then they're like, oh, well, we're definitely going to hire you, and rather than the black guy or the Hispanic, and you're all a part of some not oppressed non-white class. So we'll of course hire the Asians to satisfy our diversity requirements. And the Asians are the emerging elite, and I talked about this with Nightmare Vision on one of my recent podcasts. Is a lot of this cancel culture conflict that's happening in elite mainstream discourse is the old guard, which is a lot of them are Jewish, and a lot of them are, old style liberals who, would have believed in colorblind individualism, who subscribe to the old racial ideas that race doesn't matter, just a social construct, we should just move past it. And they're struggling against the new woke side, which a lot of them are Asians, a lot of them are awfuls, Gentile awfuls, and a few of them are blacks who are used as their like kind of mascot or their night champion to go after, the older guard, while then the Asians reap the benefits of, taking down, the centrist liberal editor who isn't woke enough for them. And
I feel like, a lot of the black intellectuals are used almost as some sort of slash and burn technique where they completely lay waste to any ongoing intellectual debate. And they inject themselves into situations like all of these loons behind the 1619 Project. I feel like they came out of absolutely nowhere. And suddenly they've injected themselves into the heart of the education debate, the racial debate, the social debate, every imaginable debate or ongoing conversation or ongoing issue. They completely destroy all work done up to that point and make it about themselves. Yeah, and I suspect that you're right, that they're being used as puppets. They're being used as some kind of I'm hesitant to say.
They're all like hiding behind them, and it's like they're great champions. They're Goliath that they use against them. They don't want to. Nobody wants to go up against the Goliath, and the black person has the greatest moral authority in the country. And they're like, are you saying that this black guy is a racist? And you better listen to him, what he's saying right now. And then they reap the benefits, and they want it, and they want. And if whites at the bottom, blacks will be at the moral peak of the pyramid, but they won't be at the economic or really at the one controlling the power. It'll be mostly the Asian elite who are rising up, particularly South Asians, who are seemingly moving up. If you're looking at all the people who are controlling a lot of these radical politics, it's South Asians who are rising up. AOC's chief advisor was a South Asian. Well, even in Republican politics, like South Asians are grossly overrepresented versus to how much. I mean, I think only only 20% of Indians vote GOP, yet they're like 20% of the people who work at the RNC. It's like grossly out of proportion to, they make up like less than 1%. I mean, maybe 0.5% of the Republican vote at most. Yet they're like 20% of the staff in Washington, D.C., in like the Republican establishment.
Well, there's I don't remember her name, but she is some kind of high caste Indian, and she's on the Seattle City Council. And she is probably the most.
Oh yeah, the communist. Like, she's an open communist. Yeah,
and so there were people from India who were talking about her, and I guess she has kind of a reputation back home. And they were saying that she's dangerous. She's definitely a former communist. She was involved with some like Chinese-funded Maoist party back in India. Which I found interesting that, a lot of Indians were kind of warning Americans, don't trust these people. These are like these weird, very high caste, almost like light-skinned Indian Brahmins who got involved with Maoist politics. But there's also people like Ro Khanna, who I think you had a run-in with recently. And Ro Khanna, I remember reading a story where he went to West Virginia. And the West Virginians were asking him, what would it take to have tech jobs in West Virginia? And he had some snide comment like, well, maybe you should have some more Indian restaurants first. And it really struck me that he is effectively an open ethnic partisan. He basically exists as an arm, maybe, of the Indian state, and he exists here in this country to actively fight for Indian ethnic interests, not just in the Bay Area of California, but across the country. And I suspect that Indians are in America. Might be looking at caste still behind the scenes, maybe for marriage and social interaction. But I do suspect that maybe they're looking past it once they arrive here in terms of professional relationships. They're willing to work together, through along caste lines or through caste lines. When it comes to networking and building power and building reliable people that can make sure they get you a job and they increase your wealth and your family's wealth. I suspect that there's probably an element of that going on. And the Chinese immigrants certainly kind of fit that model, where back in China, there's always been a lot of internal Han ethnic animus, ethno-linguistic animus between groups. But when they come to America, a lot of that fades away, and these tributary networks and these professional references and business formation practices and credit formation practices kind of transcend a lot of the old lines in China, and they work together. So I suspect that Indians are probably going to be one of the larger issues we have to deal with.
They're a very aggressive elite, and they do have contempt for whites as well. I mean, they see us like a lower caste. Like, they'll see like the Dalits is higher than us, or Dalits. Who cares about how you pronounce the Indian words? Anyway, Indians do work, but they'll make snide comments. Like, even Indians I've worked with who are high caste, they're like, oh, that guy's a low caste guy, but they'll still like try to get him a job. And they have such even Pakistanis who don't even have as strong of a caste culture have a contempt for whites, much more so than East Asians. But the funny thing about South Asians is they like both their men and women prefer whites as their partners. Like, I don't know any, like, every Indian man and woman I've ever met, they all prefer whites as like for dating. Even East Asians are a little bit at the similar level. I don't see as much clannishness among East Asians. A lot of them have become, in some ways, assimilated to our culture, but they clamor for non-white identity because they know that's how they advance in society. It gives them an extra advantage, which, if they just said if they were like idiotic and conservatives and just like, oh, I'm an individual, they're not going to get the benefits of that are awarded in our racial spoil system. And it, going back to the overall point about, Washington Post upholding white identity, that I think a lot of our listeners would probably agree with, even though had an impact on our country. I think we would say is like built our country, would be our way of wording it, is that conservatives themselves were, I think, the most angry about this. And they were definitely criticized D'Angelo on her, which this comes from D'Angelo, about trying to assert a collective white identity in order so we can all feel bad. But they don't focus on like how this should make us all feel bad. Their chief criticism is that this will encourage white identity politics, and we need to avoid identity politics. That's anti-American. It's ahistorical. Which they're going to have to deal with this going forward. Is the left is going to push this line. They're either going to say that most newspapers who are going by these standards say they would capitalize black because blacks are an actual ethnic group, while whites are not an ethnic group, which that's not necessarily true, even though whites may not see themselves as an ethnic group. Everyone else sees them as an ethnic and racial group. And there is a certain identity there. It's just that it's politically incorrect to say that in public, unless you're saying it for woke reasons. And they're going to have to deal with this. The idea that we're all individuals and this colorblind ideology is no longer appealing. It only appeals to boomers. It doesn't appeal to anyone. And I think one of the white pills of this is that with the education system saying to kids like, whites are an actual historical identity, and this is a collective group that has acted in its own interest throughout time. They'll be treating that as bad, but white kids who will be seeing themselves being, having to go through these horrible lectures about slavery and having to check their white privilege all the time, they're going to be like, why am I having to feel bad for something I didn't have any control of? Why am I having to feel bad over being white? And they will start asserting there will be a growing spur of racial consciousness among whites, even though that won't be intentional. And in some ways, among a lot of white elites, it'll be negative. But among white conservatives and a lot of these younger kids who will be looking to lash out of their, maybe during a teenage rebellion or stuff, there will be a greater diffusement of white racial consciousness in my mind. And I think they're going to go with this. I don't think the left really cares because they don't think that we'll, even though they do think that white supremacists and yada, yada, yada are the greatest threat to our country, they really want to bully us so much that they'll take that risk of the possible downside of encouraging positive white racial consciousness to get what they want, which is to turn us into second-class citizens. But this is a topic that we'll have to return to. There's a lot going on here. I think we're going to see a lot more news stories or similar events like this happening as the year goes along, because in the George Floyd era, there's a lot of insanity that can occur. Now we're going to move on to an escape from politics, or what's supposed to be an escape from politics. I'm, of course, talking about Major League Baseball. Unfortunately, Major League Baseball is no longer offering its fans an escape from politics. It's imposing politics on them. The MLB must have realized the league's name is BLM in reverse. Baseball teams are sharing memes depicting America as a racist country and celebrating the Black Power Fist. Nearly all teams are kneeling for the anthem and wearing Black Lives Matter gear. Some teams are putting BLM on the pitcher's mound and attaching BLM billboards to their stadiums. The Tampa Bay Rays are demanding the killers of Breonna Taylor are arrested for murder, and the Boston Red Sox retweeted that. How did conservatives' favorite sport go woke?
I don't know. Baseball, in particular, has always felt like a sport that kind of transcends race. It's one of the few professional sports where whites are the majority of players. It actually reflects American demographics the closest. It has more Hispanics. I think Hispanics are close to 20%. Well, they're actually close to 20%. There's a lot of East Asians who play baseball. It's very popular.
It's just the blacks are lower represented. I think they're 7 or 8% of players, and they're 13% of the population. Apparently, this is horrible that they would only be less than 13% of the player population. They have to be like basketball and NFL standards, where they're over 70% of the players.
Well, I played baseball for a long time growing up. I started with T-ball and played all the way up to high school. I didn't play in high school, but I stopped, like right before. Played in all-star leagues, played, fall ball every year. I would do spring ball stuff, which was mostly just for fun or for kind of training. And what I can tell you is that, I didn't really experience a lot of racism playing baseball. I definitely played with multiple years, several kids who were Japanese and Korean descent. Quite a few whites, sure, but different kinds of whites. It was not universal. There were definitely a few Hapas here and there. I think it's
the great American melting pot. Yeah. This is the future that conservatives want.
I definitely played with a few, Rodriguez's or Martinez's over the years. I have to say that I don't really see the race in baseball being a thing. Baseball, has always felt like a really important American institution. It's one of the more unique American sports, and there's certainly a lot of Anglo or American English colloquialisms and language that kind of feeds into the technical terms of baseball and feeds back into the language. In a lot of ways. A lot of American English is actually like baseball words, kind of cobbled together sometimes, and I think that ultimately the point is when these people scream at you, no justice, no peace, they really mean it. And so they don't want you to be able to have a sense of escapism, right? They don't really want you to have the ability to say, I'm kind of done with the protesting today. I've seen too much of it on the news. I don't want to hear about racial politics anymore. I want to watch the Dodgers beat the Diamondbacks, or I want to watch just my team play a game. I want to relax, maybe do some work or just hang out, but have it on in the background. And you're not even allowed to do that because every 5 minutes there's going to be a commercial, and it's going to have some NGO or some nonprofit or some whatever talking about whatever. There's going to be some news cut in. The broadcasters or the sportscasters are going to get worse and worse. They're going to be including this kind of commentary into their sportscast. So you're not going to be able to go 10 minutes into a baseball game without this being shoved into your face. And of course, when lockdown ends, I expect that as life goes back to normal, let's say, and we're allowed to go back to baseball stadiums, I fully expect you're going to have people trying to shut down the stadium. You're going to have masses of people buying tickets who are going to show up and do some kind of political action. They're going to run on the field. They're going to throw like a mini riot in the stadium stands. They're going to do it near right that sweet spot right behind third plate. It's just going to be a disaster.
Yeah, but that's assuming that the fans will return. I mean, there may be like 2 years before that. I don't even think we're going to have. I think baseball's going to get canceled probably next week. I mean, which is really sad. The entire Marlins team has like coronavirus, so it's like you have one team that can't even play, and there'll probably be multiple other teams that are going to have the similar problems. And once I guarantee, once there's like a second or 3 teams that have the similar problems are going to have to cancel. But regardless, I mean, I agree with your point that it's actually been a pretty apolitical game. And there's been a lot of baseball players who are open about supporting Trump, which they couldn't have done in the NFL or especially not the NBA. And like, there's even all these like ex-baseball stars like Aubrey Huff, I believe that's his name, and Curt Schilling, who are really super conservative and say stuff on Twitter that I wouldn't even want to say. And these are guys who played in the World Series. They were not like, just some backbencher. They were like serious stars. But there's been some degree of the, baseball's been more politically correct. There was a Seattle catcher who he made some comment about Black Lives Matter, saying he didn't like it, or he shared some tweet, and he was cut from the team, and he has not played baseball since. Now, maybe it's because he wasn't that good, but they're saying the same. Compared to Colin Kaepernick, this was a guy who was like a solid catcher. He was not like a terrible, like the worst player on the team, and he couldn't get another team to take him because of this one comment he made about Black Lives Matter in 2016. And so the Mariners cut him, and now he can't even play baseball. So, but compared to just NFL and NBA, and probably even with, hockey is hockey has pride nights now and stuff. Even though hockey is like a way wider sport, I don't think most MLB teams have had pride nights. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong. But it's always a sport where conservatives could just return, like they got to experience the 1950s every time they turned on the game. It's like,
right.
The rules haven't really changed that much. The players, it's the aesthetics of the game. It's like they're still playing the old organ music. They're not really playing hip, like new rap and rock in the stadium. It's like a very traditional game where things haven't really changed in 70 years. And so they get to return to that. And now conservatives have to face that. They see that their favorite sport is opposing all this. And in terms of DC conservatives, this is their favorite sport. And they all like the worst teams. They like the Mets, the Indians, even though the Indians are now good, and the Cubs. Like they love these historically loser teams, which says a lot about conservatives. Is that they always root for the historically loser teams. And they're now seeing that this sport is turning on them, but they're refusing to actually admit that. Like there was a column last week written by Matthew Continetti, who is Bill Kristol's son-in-law, and he's helped found the Washington Free Beacon, a very important conservative, who said that he loves baseball because it offers an escape from the politics, which clearly that's not happening. And I think the worst person about this is baseball crank Dan McLaughlin, who's a National Review writer, who obviously loves baseball because his handle is baseball crank, and his Avi is his face superimposed on a baseball, screaming, going, it's like a Reddit face. And Chapo has always made fun of this Avi. It's like terrible. It's now has a face mask on it, which makes it even worse. But I, tweeted at him, he was complaining about the Tampa Bay Rays, saying that Breonna Taylor's killer should be brought to justice. And he's like, this is really creepy for a corporation to demand it. I'm okay with an individual saying this, but this is really creepy. And I was like, well, you find this creepy, yet, the MLB could burn a giant American flag out in the field, and you would still be watching the sport and still obsessed over these stats and minutia. And he replied back, there is more to a life well lived than practicing politics 24/7 in all aspects of one's life. If you're reduced to living that way, the left has already won. Well, by you accepting this corporation or this thing you love, imposing its politics on you that are antithetical to your beliefs and are basically saying we hate you and we don't care about your beliefs, then you are once again accepting the politicization of all facts of life. If you want depoliticization, you should not be watching the MLB. You should not be buying MLB products. But with conservatives are the one conservative consumer that no corporation except for Fox News cares about. Every corporation could say, we hate you, we support the left, we think you're a racist, and conservatives will be like, well, I guess I still have to buy the product. I guess
well, maybe other than like Cabela's.
Yeah, Cabela's.
The giant black pyramid.
There's some corporations. Hobby Lobby. Okay, you can shop at Hobby Lobby, but out of entertainment and things that you're going to turn on TV, every channel except for Fox News is saying we hate you. We're putting trans rights. Yeah. And it's it's same with Netflix. Netflix had this ad out where it was showing that how trans rights matter. We stand trans advocates. And because it showed this 8-10-year-old who is the nurse was calling him a boy, and it's I'm a girl. And then they're like, this is, and this brave actress in the show stood up against the bigoted nurse. And these are the values that are imposed on them, and conservatives just can grumble and take it. And with baseball, they can take to their platform and saying, we're not watching MLB, and they won't do it. They're going to be devastated when the season ends because of Corona. but they're just a consumer that no one cares about. It's a weak consumer that exerts no power on the market.
And a lot of them end up consuming the product anyways, by the way.
Yeah.
Like they're very they don't actually have follow through. And I think that's a perennial issue with conservatives and everything, is that there's no follow through. But if you know any of them personally or anything like that, you'll know that they'll still consume the product. They'll still watch that Netflix show. They'll still watch that baseball game. They'll still buy that thing, use that service. Like, there's nothing that really prohibits a lot of them. Now, sometimes I think the boycotts can work. I think like a good example of maybe not something that's totally conservative focused, but that is just general wide disapproval would be like the Oscars for the last few years, I think, have had abysmal ratings. And that's primarily because, it's so political and it's so over the top and it's so ostentatious and ridiculous to have golden statues and all these people wearing $4,000 suits talking about activism while they win a big golden award for doing a play or a movie. So I think that there is capacity.
Well, the NFL with the anthem protests,
they
had a
work.
declining attendance rates, they had a declining ratings, and they clearly were like, you have to stand for the anthem because we're getting hurt right now. We cannot promote like left-wing messages. But I mean, the recent George Floyd protests have totally wiped that away. And most of these leagues, like the MLB, only had one player who knelt prior to the season. They only had one player. And that's it shows like a baseball's, apolitical or rather conservative nature, that they only had one player kneel for the anthem or try to do any type of protest.
I feel like the more blacks involved in your sport, the more likely there is to be sympathetic kind of white political maneuvering by kneeling, by saying the right things. I think that there is a point to be made sure that the blacks are not in line with their population standing in terms of their standing in baseball. And maybe that's what's preventing quite a bit of this sort of weird political infusion. Whereas football and basketball are, overwhelmingly black. And there's an overwhelming amount of focus on the black athletes therein. Whereas baseball, it's always felt like a lot of baseball stars are also not gaudy. They're not very ostentatious.
Flamboyant,
they're not.
And a lot of them don't have really big personalities either.
Yeah,
and big stars like A-Rod, like none of these guys. I can't really think of like a LeBron James like figure or star. Like the average NBA player is like always loves to mouth off and is like has like a big celebrity status, and several
going to the
players
jewelry
like
shop one time a week in New York City. I mean, I feel like a lot of baseball players, especially from a lot of teams that aren't like the big 3 or 4, are just normal people, and they just play a sport. Baseball is a sport where you actually have to spend a lot of time honing your skills. There's a lot of strategy, especially with the invention of sabermetrics. I think it's actually led baseball players to being more productive, train harder, because they're playing a very different kind of game now, a game that has much more strategy and even statistical modeling involved. So they have to work their asses off. And I don't think that they have time to engage in political activism, to engage in that sort of syllogism for the sake of nothing. It just doesn't feel like something that they need to invest their time with, I would say. Whereas with football, they're at this point, football feels like it's actually gotten less and less complex. And, there's more and more free time for these players to basically mouth off or start feuds or, kneel and create problems. And often, I think this point's been made, it seems like the people who get involved with this are of incredibly low skill, like Colin Kaepernick. By all accounts, was a pretty terrible quarterback. He's definitely an idiot, and he's definitely not strategic thinking. But I don't really watch a lot of football, but I have had people tell me that he was very close to getting cut from his team when his whole drama.
Yeah, he was already the backup.
Yeah, his whole drama started 3 or 4 years ago. He was probably going to get cut, and I think he has been cut at this point. And
Colin Kaepernick hasn't played since 2016.
Yeah. So, I want to say that this feels like the way that the Indians use racial politics for political and economic advancement. I want to say that there's probably a good amount of that going on within sort of the black politicking, and that they want more stuff, they want more responsibility, or they want to keep their job at the very least. And so it's easy for them to engage with the zeitgeist and say that my employment here is part of a wider racial struggle, which is kind of stupid and ridiculous, but it works. And so it prevents you from getting cut right away. Colin Kaepernick staved off the end of his contract for quite a while. He was able to get sponsorship deals, and I suspect that in the workplace, in the professional environment, in sports, in politics, non-whites, blacks in particular, will infuse their day-to-day life with this sort of imagined plight and this imagined crusade as a way of propelling themselves forward, or at least keeping their current position active and fresh. And they can avoid economic repercussions. They can avoid getting laid off. They can avoid getting fired. That kind of thing. They can maybe secure advancement more easily. They can browbeat their employers. They can browbeat their contract holders. They can browbeat the courts if they go to court for something or another. You can just imagine the amount of power that gives you to say that what your day-to-day life is actually a righteous crusade, and that that should be respected for what you're doing. I suspect that MLB is that's what's really going on here. Is a lot of black players. I mean, the last major black player I can remember off the top of my head is Barry Bonds, who was
who was hated. I mean, people did not want him to win the home run title because he was juicing. He was a bad sport. He was like arrogant. Fans really hated him. Like everyone hated Barry Bonds, and everyone knew he was juicing. Yeah. And unlike Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, he was not subtle about it. And he was just like, yeah, whatever, I juiced. So what? I'm the king now. And there was something that was like very opposed to the baseball ethos. I think people liked King Griffey Jr. a lot more because Griffey was much, more in tune with the average white MLB players, like values and culture and stuff. And he was a little bit of a flashy player, but not to the same extent like the NBA players and stars are. But, the baseball, we're going to see a lot of these sports happen like this. So we'll have to pause on that discussion, and we'll move on to our final segment, which this comes from one of our very valued Patreon listeners. Reminder, you can get the power to ask questions on Highly Respected if you sign up for Highly Respected Patreon's patron option. So if you would like to ask a question, go to the Highly Respected Patreon and sign up there. This one comes from someone who wanted to go nameless. This anonymous patron asks, Scott, who do you think will be Joe Biden's running mate? Well, he'll announce this Saturday, so we will find out this weekend. There are 5 serious candidates. There's Kamala Harris, Karen Bass, who's a California congresswoman, Susan Rice, Val Demings, and Keisha Bottoms, who's the mayor of Atlanta. And Val Demings is a congresswoman, I believe, from Florida. And I think everyone kind of realizes it's going to be Kamala. I mean, Kamala's the favorite. I mean, Politico had this weird error page yesterday where they claimed that Biden had already selected her and they had a Biden quote. Whether it was an honest error or there was some embargo, we're not going to know. I think if it was an embargo, one other news outlet would have announced it by now. So maybe it's not Kamala, but Kamala is the clear favorite. And I don't think Demings and Keisha Bottoms are in the serious running. I think it's really between Harris, Bass, and Rice. Demings and Keisha Bottoms are kind of like lightweights. They really need somebody who can assume the presidency on day one because they are going to be the real president. Let's be honest here. Joe Biden is not capable of being president. So this person is going to be very important to who he wants to pick. With Kamala, Kamala has like national experience. She, of course, ran for president. So she has experience dealing with the national press and being under intense scrutiny and campaigning on a national level and working that type of basis. And she clearly wants the job. The problem with her is she called Biden a racist on the debate stage. Everyone thinks of her as two-faced. I mean, yes, all politicians are two-faced, but her especially. And, you know, she is an authoritarian at heart. Rice has never held an elected position. She's just been appointed. Karen Bass, been around a long time, not very charismatic, also very left-wing. She's praised Fidel Castro. If I had to pick, you know, I would just go boring. Yeah, it's probably going to be Kamala. I think they're just holding this out for anticipation. I think the hardest for Trump, I think it's going to be Kamala. The more interesting factor is like, what would be worse for Trump? I think the worst VP that they could pick is Susan Rice, not because Susan Rice is so impeccable or great. It's just that they can't really fearmonger about Susan Rice. Susan Rice, like, she has very little domestic policy record. This is not an election about foreign policy. All of her focus has been on foreign policy. This is probably, in my memory, the least foreign policy focused election of all time. Trump's campaign doesn't seem to be wanting to run on this, especially because he's relying on the Republican establishment so much, which has a very different policy from Trump. Like, they don't want to say like Trump has kept us out of war. Like, he didn't get involved in Syria. He's like, he's getting us out of Afghanistan. The Republican establishment wants us to stay in Afghanistan. They wanted us to get more into Syria. They want like war. So they don't want to run on that message. And with Susan Rice, they're going to have to bring back Benghazi, which nobody in 2020 cares about in Benghazi anymore. It's going to be like a time machine to boomer conservative talking points of 2013 if they bring in Susan Rice. And it's not going to have any appeal among the average voter. So, and Susan Rice fully announces, we're bringing back Obama. We're bringing back the Obama days. Like, hit the rewind button to 2014. That's what we're going back to. And that's a very appealing message to a lot of Americans who want normality to return. They just want their normal lives back so they can sit and grill and not have to worry about riots and coronavirus. And with Biden and Rice, that's the message. I think Harris and Bass are both are much better for Trump, as that he can fearmonger about them. One of the problems and I've said this in podcasts before, is that Trump is having trouble like creating fear and terror about Biden. Like, nobody is terrified by Joe Biden. He is not as radical as the Trump campaign wants him to be. Anytime they're like, will you denounce this left-wing craziness? He'll say, yes, I oppose defunding the police. No, I'm not a socialist. I believe we should protect statues. Like, they can't have that. With Harris and Bass, they will finally have that opportunity. I think Bass is even more left-wing. I think that might even be better for Trump's campaign on top of a fear-mongering status. But with Harris, people really hate Harris, and that finally gives them something to campaign on and sharpens their message.
She was like a terrible Democratic primary candidate. She kind of got booed out of the race.
Well, she's just so fake and artificial, and everyone just sees her as like, a total authoritarian who wants to like send out the troops to like murder conservatives. Like, that's so obvious. She can't hide it. And she's so fake, like her saying like, I'm a big Tupac fan. And they're like, what are some Tupac songs, And she's like, and it's like, I listened to Tupac in college, and it's like, Tupac was like a teenager when you were in college. Like he had no recordings out.
Yeah.
And so she's just so fake and artificial. I mean, she, like people say like she's the Marco Rubio of the Democrats. I think she's a lot smarter than Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is a total automaton who has no like authentic beliefs whatsoever. I think Kamala is like an authentic, like deep down an authoritarian who wants like power and control. And she's also primarily, I mean, she's half Indian, half Jamaican. I think she's much more Indian than Jamaican. Like this is a lot of Indians. Like they have no principles except for obtaining power. And Kamala is like the poster girl for this.
What does the Mets always say? It's the century of the Tamil. I think that's applicable.
Yeah, that's really her. And I think it's hers. And you may disagree with this, Hans. Like, who do you think it'll be?
I think it'll be Harris. I mean, I've actually thought it was going to be Harris for a long time.
In June they already said that she had it wrapped up, and people have been bringing. I didn't mention Stacey Abrams. Like Stacey Abrams is only brought up by the press. Like Biden's people, especially his black lawmakers around him, hate Abrams. They remember that she was basically endorsed Bloomberg. They see her as an interloper, and she's also not won like a major statewide office. I think she's only been a state senator.
She's famous for losing, and then for
she's famous for losing, and they think of her as like a usurper. They're like, no, you're not getting it. I think they'll give her, if they win, they'll give her an administrative, like a cabinet position. But I don't think they're not going to give. There's nobody saying it's really between those three. I think if it was up to Biden's people, they would give it to Rice, but I think the Black Congressional Caucus is not happy with giving it to somebody who isn't really risen with them, is somebody who's totally focused on domestic policy. And the reason our foreign policy, and the reason why they would be picking a black woman is because of domestic policy. It's not because foreign policy. And I don't think Susan Rice really is comfortable talking about racial issues in the country. And one good thing that would happen with Susan Rice if she was vice president, there would be they wouldn't be as the Obama, or rather the Biden administration. I mean, it really is the Obama administration, wouldn't be so radical if she's in there, because they'd be so focused on these stupid foreign policy ventures that they wouldn't be trying to like push reparations and.
Well, I think Samantha Powers is actually slated to make a comeback. In the Obama,
all the Obama people,
they're all coming back.
I mean, all the Obama people are coming back for Biden, and with Rice, it really announces that Kamala is not an Obama person. She's much more radical, and she wants to use state power to a much greater extent than really any Democrat in history, and especially in modern history. And she would definitely push for reparations, for like imposing hate speech laws and all this stuff. So Bass would also be. It would be really odd if they picked Bass, because she's very far left. She's not charismatic. She's not been around the national stage. And all of her interviews are really boring. And I think she would be uncomfortable.
Person. What's her name?
Yeah, Karen Bass, California Congresswoman.
I've never heard of this person.
Yeah, and she would be I think she would also be very uncomfortable about having to defend Biden's record on crime and busing.
Well, that's like the weirdest ploy the Republicans have come up with. Like, hey, did you know that Joe Biden was a racist back in the 1993? Like, doesn't that make you want to vote?
The mainstream media would still ask Bass about this. So I think we'll all agree. We'll find out this Saturday. They're announcing it August 1st. We'll probably find out Friday night. I think it'll be Kamala. I think they've just added some drama to make people more interested in who he's going to pick. The one thing that may not be Harris is that if it was Harris's secured, they would have already announced much earlier. The fact that they're waiting till the very last day, because Biden said, I believe in the spring, he's like, I would announce this by August 1st. And the Floyd factor changes. I think this is Klobuchar's lined up. And then the Floyd protest happened, and the fact that she defended Derek Chauvin and had also had a bad record as a district attorney, they're like, Klobuchar, we're not getting this white, we're not getting the Karen as our.
Not to mention that she herself just didn't do well in the primary process. I mean, she kind of came in behind the gay mayor.
She did much better than people expected, and she was a safe, moderate pick. And they're trying to win white suburbanites, and she's a good pick for that. I actually hate Klobuchar more than Kamala. She is actually, I hate the term Karen, but she is the ultimate Karen. Like, I need to speak to your manager. She's thrown like staplers or like stuff at binders at her staff. She's like horribly cruel to her staff. And people want to say, like, going back to her first point with like Ted Yoho and AOC, is like when women are in the workplace, they treat and talk to other people that no man would talk to another man, because they know that violence would happen. Like, Klobuchar never has to worry about her staff like punching her in the face for how she treats them.
It makes you think of like Mitt Romney with binders full of women. I mean, that's the difference between binders for men and women in the workplace.
Yeah, but men like use binders to pick out qualified women, while women are throwing binders at their subordinates.
At their 22-year-old intern who just got out of Georgetown, whatever. It's like a
university. This is it. But yeah, to conclude, we're out of time now, but I think it's going to be Harris. I think we're both agreed about this. We could be wrong, but we'll see. But anyway, all the time we have today, Hans, tell people how they can listen to your podcast.
Same as last time, guys. Go to myth20c.wordpress.com. You can find the RSS information. You can find the BitChute links, and we hope to continue publishing our content even with tech censorship coming up. It could get worse. And also make sure to check out The American Sun. It's a project I've worked on for a while with some of the guys from Myth and a few other people. A lot of great content posted there, and there'll be some interesting stuff coming out soon I think you'll all be interested in. So make sure to check that out as well.
Great. And thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me, Scott. It's always a pleasure.
You are mighty welcome. And until next time, stay respected.